The birthday cake sat on my workbench like a monument to failure. 40 candles, 40 years of life, and exactly 0 people who gave enough of a damn to show up. I'd bought the cake myself from the grocery store bakery. Chocolate with vanilla frosting and Happy Birthday Mike scrawled in blue icing by some teenager who probably made more per hour than I did fixing broken electrical panels. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name's Mike Sullivan, and I'm an electrical contractor in Millbrook, Ohio, one of those Rust Belt towns that peaked sometime around 1987 and has been sliding downhill ever since. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, but nobody talks about it until it's too late to matter. I'd thrown myself a party, sent out invitations, bought beer, made sandwiches, cleaned the garage, even strung up some lights. Professional grade, naturally. The whole 9 yards for the big 4-0. My wife Cassandra had begged off with a migraine, which was her go-to excuse whenever she didn't want to deal with my side of life. The handful of guys I'd invited from work had better things to do, apparently. Same with the neighbors. So there I sat, alone in my garage at 9:30 on a Saturday night, wearing my old boxing gloves and eating birthday cake with a plastic fork. The gloves were a joke gift from my boxing coach Stu about 10 years back, but tonight they felt appropriate. Sometimes life needs you to keep your guard up, even when you're celebrating. Turns out you can't spell 40 without forgotten, I muttered to the empty garage. The house behind me was dark except for the kitchen light. Cass was probably upstairs in bed, scrolling through her phone, doing lawyer things. She was always doing lawyer things, even on weekends, even on my birthday, even when we used to try having conversations that lasted longer than grocery lists and utility bills. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where people bought houses with big dreams and small down payments, then spent the next 30 years watching those dreams get smaller while the payments stayed the same. My house was a 1970s split level with brown siding and a 2-car garage that I'd converted into a workshop. The American Dream, Rust Belt edition. I'd built my electrical business from nothing. Started with a beat-up van and a toolbox, worked my way up to 3 trucks and 5 employees. Nothing fancy, but honest work. Good work. The kind that kept the lights on in half the town, literally. But in Cass's world, her law firm, her charity galas, her family gatherings, I was always the guy who showed up with grease under his fingernails. Her father, Richard Whitman, never let me forget it. Made sure I knew I wasn't good enough for his daughter every chance he got. Passive-aggressive comments about blue-collar limitations and reaching beyond one's station. The kind of upper-middle-class snobbery that made me want to rewire his house with aluminum wire and walk away. I was halfway through my second piece of cake when my phone buzzed. Text message. Sorry about tonight. Headache got worse. Rain check? C. Rain check. Like my birthday was a baseball game that could be rescheduled due to weather. I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone down without responding. What was the point? The garage was my sanctuary. Workbench along one wall, tool chests organized the way I liked them, a heavy bag hanging in the corner for when the day's frustrations needed somewhere to go. The concrete floor was stained with years of oil and paint and honest work. It smelled like WD-40 and sawdust and possibility. I finished the cake, blew out the candles, and made a wish. Then I spent an hour hitting the heavy bag until my shoulders ached and my hands were sore inside the gloves. By the time I went inside, Cass was asleep, or pretending to be. Hard to tell the difference anymore. A week later, I was under Mrs. Peterson's kitchen sink, replacing a garbage disposal that had given up the ghost, when my phone rang. Cass's ringtone, some classical piece she'd programmed because she thought it made her sound sophisticated. Mike, I need to talk to you about Dad's party, she said without preamble. No hello, no how's your day, just straight to business. That was Cass. What about it? I worked a wrench around a stubborn fitting, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. The catering bill came in higher than expected. I'm going to need you to cover the difference. I stopped working. How much higher? $1,800. The wrench slipped and I banged my knuckles against the cabinet. $1,800? For what? The extra appetizers, the upgraded wine selection, the extended service time. You know how these things go? I knew how these things went, all right. Her father's 65th birthday party had been a command performance at the country club, full of lawyers and doctors and people who thought a working man's presence was somewhere between amusing and embarrassing. I'd worn my best suit and smiled at their jokes and pretended not to notice when they talked around me like I wasn't there. Cass, that's more than I make in a week. Mike, please. It's family. Family. Her family. The family that had made it clear from day one that I wasn't really part of it, just some unfortunate attachment that came with their daughter's rebellious phase. The family that had somehow produced a daughter who could go to law school and make partner before 30, but couldn't be bothered to show up for her husband's birthday. "Send me the bill," I said finally. "I'll look at it." "I already paid it. I just need you to Venmo me the difference." Of course she did. I finished the disposal installation in silence, said goodbye to Mrs. Peterson, and drove home thinking about $1,800. About birthday cakes eaten alone, about the slow, grinding erosion of a marriage that had started with promise and turned into a business arrangement where I was the junior partner. The Venmo request was waiting when I got home. $1,800 with a note, "Dad's party, thanks." I stared at it for 10 minutes. Then I sent her $1 with the note, "Happy birthday to me." And I blocked her. The next morning, I called the bank and removed her access to our joint credit cards. If she wanted to play financial hardball, I could play too. I'd been handling money just fine before I met her, and I'd been covering more than my share of our expenses for years while she built her career. My phone started ringing around noon. I didn't answer. Detective Ray Ames was the kind of cop who'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. He showed up at my office on Tuesday morning with a younger partner whose name I didn't catch, both of them wearing the kind of serious expressions that meant somebody had made a complaint. "Mr. Sullivan, we need to ask you a few questions about your wife." My office was a double-wide trailer behind the shop where I kept the trucks. Not much to look at, but it was mine. I gestured to the folding chairs across from my desk and tried to look cooperative. "What kind of questions?" "She filed a report yesterday. Says you've been financially abusive. Cut off her credit cards, blocked her on social media, that kind of thing." Ames consulted his notebook. "She also mentioned some concerns about intimidation." I almost laughed. "Intimidation?" I sent her $1 on Venmo and didn't answer my phone. "She says you've been acting erratically, aggressive behavior, threats of violence." "What threats? When?" The younger cop spoke up. "She mentioned something about you saying you'd show her what a real man looks like during an argument last week." I stared at him. "I never said that. We haven't had an argument in months. We barely talk." "So you're denying the allegations?" "I'm denying them because they're bullshit. Look, Detective." I glanced at his badge. "Detective Ames, my wife asked me to pay $1,800 for her father's birthday party, a party where I wasn't welcome for a man who treats me like dirt. I said no. That's not abuse, that's having a backbone." Ames made a note. "What about the credit cards?" "Joint accounts. My name's on them too. I have every right to manage our finances." "She says you're trying to control her, cut off her independence." "She makes more money than I do. She's got her own checking account, her own savings, her own car payment. The only thing I cut off was her ability to spend my money without asking." They asked a few more questions, mostly variations on the same theme. Was I angry? Sure. Was I planning to hurt anyone? No. Did I understand that domestic disputes could escalate quickly? Yeah, I understood that perfectly. After they left, I sat in my trailer office and tried to figure out what the hell was happening. Cass was a lot of things: cold, ambitious, self-centered, but she wasn't the type to make false accusations. Unless she was more desperate than I thought. My phone rang. Dale Morrison, my business partner and the closest thing I had to a real friend. "Mike, what the hell's going on? I just had 2 cops in here asking about your character." "Cass is playing games." "What kind of games?" I told him about the party, the bill, the blocked Venmo request. Dale listened without interrupting, which was one of his better qualities. "You sure you want to start a war with a lawyer?" he asked when I finished. I didn't start anything. I just stopped playing along. Same thing, in her world. These people don't like being told no. Dale was right, and I knew it. But I was tired of being the reasonable one, the one who backed down, the one who paid the bills and smiled and pretended everything was fine. 40 years old, and what did I have to show for it? A failing marriage, a modest business, and the growing certainty that I'd spent the last decade making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. "Let her play games," I said. "I've got a few moves of my own." The boxing gym was my second home, Stu's place officially, though everyone just called it the gym. It occupied the bottom floor of a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting and the permanent smell of sweat and leather. Stu Kowalski had been running it for 30 years, ever since he retired from a moderately successful professional career with most of his brain cells intact. I'd been coming here since my 20s, back when I thought I might make something of myself in the ring. Never had the killer instinct for competition, but I could work a heavy bag like therapy. Stu always said I had good hands but a soft heart, which was probably why I'd ended up married to a woman who could file false police reports with a straight face. "You look like hell," Stu said when I walked in Thursday evening. He was in his 70s now, built like a fire hydrant with gray hair and forearms that could crack walnuts. "Heard you had some excitement at work." Word traveled fast in Millbrook. Cops came by. Cass is trying to make me look like a wife-beater. "You hit her?" "Never laid a hand on her. Barely raised my voice." Stu wrapped my hands with practiced efficiency. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. They bottle everything up until something gives. I'm not dangerous. Maybe that's your problem. I worked the heavy bag for an hour, trying to punch my frustrations into submission. The rhythm was meditative. Jab, cross, hook, move. Jab, cross, hook, move. The bag didn't judge, didn't lie, didn't ask for money or make excuses. It just absorbed whatever I had to give and asked for more. When I got home, the house was dark. Cass's car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't unusual. She'd been working late more often recently, or at least that's what she called it. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled into my recliner to watch whatever game was on ESPN. That's when I saw the tablet. We shared an iPad for household stuff. Shopping lists, Netflix, that kind of thing. It was sitting on the coffee table, screen dark, innocent as a sleeping cat. But something about it nagged at me. Maybe it was the way it was positioned, like someone had set it down quickly and forgotten about it. I picked it up and swiped it awake. The Messages app was open. Cass's messages, synced from her phone. Most recent conversation was with someone named D, and it was explicit. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Mike's at the gym again?" "Same here. Room 412, like always." "Wear the red thing I bought you." I scrolled up. Weeks of messages, months, photos I recognized. My wife, in lingerie I'd never seen, in positions I'd never experienced. Hotel receipts, dinner plans, inside jokes about the husband, who was too stupid to notice what was happening under his nose. The most recent photo was time-stamped 2 hours ago. Cass and a man I recognized, Darren Walsh, her law partner. They were in a hotel room, and they weren't discussing legal briefs. I set the tablet down very carefully, like it might explode. Then I went to the kitchen and got another beer. Then another. By the time Cass came home at 11:30, I was working on my fourth and trying to decide what to do with the information I'd stumbled across. "How was your evening?" I asked when she walked in. "Long day at the office. You know how it is." She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, and her hair was different. Styled. She looked good. Better than she'd looked for me in years. "Yeah," I said. "I know exactly how it is." She went upstairs without another word. I sat in my chair until 3 a.m, drinking beer and staring at the tablet and feeling something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something more focused than that. By the time I went to bed, I knew what I was going to do. Friday morning, I called in sick and drove to the Marriott downtown. The same hotel from the photos, the same hotel where my wife had been having her long days at the office. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:47 a.m., Darren Walsh's silver BMW pulled into the parking garage. At 12:15, Cass's Honda followed. I gave them 30 minutes, then walked across the street with a toolbox and a work shirt that said maintenance on the back. Amazing how invisible you become when you look like you belong. The BMW was parked on the 3rd level, gleaming and pristine. Darren was the kind of guy who probably washed it twice a week and had the oil changed every 3,000 miles, whether it needed it or not. The kind of guy who'd never changed a tire or jumped a battery or done anything more mechanical than adjusting his rearview mirror. I keyed it. Not deep enough to hit metal, just enough to spell out cheater along the driver's side in letters 6 inches tall. Then I left a note under the windshield wiper. "You're screwing my wife. Hope your insurance is as good as my aim." Juvenile? Maybe. But it felt good in a way that surprised me. I was back in my truck when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mike, it's Willa." Willa Chen was Cass's best friend from law school, the kind of supportive confidant who always seemed to be around during the rough patches. She was also the only person who'd ever seemed to genuinely like me, which should have been a red flag in retrospect. "Hey, Willa, what's up?" "I heard about the police visit. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just some marital drama. Cass is really upset. She thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." I almost laughed. "I'm having a breakdown. She's the one screwing her law partner and calling the cops when I won't pay for her father's party." Silence on the other end. Then, "You know about Darren?" "Found out yesterday. Apparently I'm the last to know, as usual." "Mike, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but..." "But what?" You thought I was too fragile to handle the truth? I thought it might be a phase. You know how Cass gets when she's stressed. Stressed? Right. My wife was stressed, so naturally she had to relieve that stress by fucking her business partner in hotel rooms while her husband ate birthday cake alone in the garage. Where are you right now? Willa asked. Downtown. Why? Want to grab coffee? I think we should talk. We met at a Starbucks near the courthouse. Willa looked exactly like what she was. A successful attorney in her 30s, put together and professional, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money or respect or whether people took her seriously. How long have you known? I asked. A few months, maybe longer. She stirred her latte with the kind of precision that suggested she was choosing her words carefully. Cass has been different lately. More secretive. Different how? Happier, I guess. More alive. I haven't seen her like this since law school. Since law school. Since before she met me, in other words. She's been talking about leaving, Willa continued, starting fresh. She thinks you two have grown apart. Grown apart? Is that what we're calling adultery now? Mike, I know you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm done. I stood up. Thanks for the coffee. Wait. She grabbed my arm. There's something else you should know. I sat back down. You're not the only one she's been seeing. The coffee shop seemed to get quieter around us. What do you mean? Darren's not the only one. There's been others. I think this has been going on longer than either of us realized. I stared at her. How much longer? Years, maybe. I'm not sure. But Mike, the way she talks about you... Willa looked uncomfortable. She's been setting you up. The police report, the financial stuff. I think she's building a case. A case for what? Divorce. She wants to make you look unstable, controlling. That way she gets the house, alimony, everything. I felt something shift inside me, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. Why are you telling me this? Because you don't deserve it. You're a good guy, Mike. Maybe the only good guy I know? I walked back to my truck in a daze. The parking garage across the street was buzzing with activity, security guards, a tow truck, someone shouting about vandalism. Apparently Darren had found his car. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. You're not the only one she screwed over. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Who is this? No response, but I was starting to get an idea. Saturday morning, I did something I'd never done before. I went full villain. If Cass wanted to play games, I'd show her what games looked like when someone who understood electricity and construction and the fine art of making things work, or not work, decided to play back. First stop, the county courthouse. Public records are a beautiful thing when you know what to look for. Darren Walsh, it turned out, had some interesting financial arrangements. A lawsuit from a former client alleging malpractice. A lien on his condo from unpaid contractor bills. A divorce settlement that was bleeding him dry. I made copies of everything and dropped them off at the Millbrook Gazette with a note. Thought you might find this interesting. A concerned citizen. Next stop. Mrs. Chalmers, my 70-year-old neighbor who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. I found her in her garden, wearing a sun hat and gloves, attacking weeds with the focused intensity of a combat veteran. Mike, how are you, dear? I heard there was some excitement at your house the other day. Police visit. Cass is having some kind of midlife crisis. Mrs. Chalmers straightened up, suddenly interested. Oh my, what kind of crisis? I told her about the affair, the hotel meetings, the financial manipulation. Not all of it, just enough to get her gossip engine running. Mrs. Chalmers was better than social media when it came to spreading news around the neighborhood. That poor girl, she said, shaking her head. She always seemed so put together. You just never know what goes on behind closed doors. You really don't, I agreed. By Monday morning, half the town was buzzing with rumors about Cass and her law partner. By Tuesday, someone had called the State Bar Association with an anonymous tip about unprofessional conduct. By Wednesday, Darren's financial problems were front-page news in the local paper. I was in my office when Dale knocked on the door. You need to see this, he said, holding up his phone. It was a video from the parking lot of Cass's law firm. A repo truck was hooking up her Honda while she stood on the sidewalk in her business suit, shouting at the driver. A small crowd had gathered to watch, including several people I recognized from her office. How did you... Dale started. Turns out she leased that car with me as cosigner. Funny thing about cosigners, they can authorize repossession if the payments are behind. Are they behind? They are now. Dale stared at me. Jesus, Mike. What's gotten into you? I'm tired of being the good guy. The good guy finishes last, pays other people's bills, and eats birthday cake alone in his garage. My phone rang. Cass. Mike, what the hell did you do? I exercised my legal rights as a co-signer. Don't like it? Pay your own bills. You son of a bitch. I need that car. Should have thought of that before you decided to screw your law partner. We need to talk. No, we don't. We need to get divorced. I'll have papers drawn up. I hung up and blocked her number. That evening, I was at the gym when Stu pulled me aside. Heard you're having some marital problems. Had. Past tense? You sure about that? Because your wife's friend is here asking questions about you. I looked around the gym. Willa was standing by the front desk, looking out of place in her business attire. She's been here for 20 minutes, Stu said. Asking about your temper, your training, whether you've ever hurt anyone. Sounds like she's fishing. I walked over to Willa, who smiled when she saw me coming. Mike, I was hoping I'd find you here. What do you want, Willa? To talk. About Cass, about what's happening. I think you two need to work this out before it gets worse. It's already as bad as it gets. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having some kind of breakdown. The car, the rumors, the public humiliation. This isn't like you. I stared at her. Something in her tone, in the way she was looking at me, felt wrong. How would you know what's like me? I've known you for 8 years, Mike. You're not a vengeful person. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Maybe I know you better than you know yourself. There was something in her eyes, something that made me think of predators circling wounded prey. I'd seen that look before, but never from someone who was supposed to be on my side. I have to go, I said. Mike, wait. But I was already walking away, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was being watched by someone who wanted me to fail. It took me 3 days to set up the surveillance at the old lakeside warehouse. The building had been abandoned for years, ever since the manufacturing plant closed down, but it was isolated and had good acoustics. Perfect for a conversation that needed to stay private. I'd lured them there separately. Cass got a text from my phone. We need to talk. Warehouse on Lake Road, 8 p.m. Come alone if you want to work this out. Darren got a call from a burner phone. I've got information about your financial problems. Meet me at the warehouse tonight if you want to make them go away. Willa got an anonymous email. I know what you did. Warehouse on Lake Road, 8 p.m., or everyone else finds out too. I arrived early and set up a digital recorder in the rafters, then hid behind a stack of old equipment where I could see and hear everything. The acoustics were even better than I'd hoped. Cass arrived first, looking nervous and checking her phone every 30 seconds. Darren showed up 10 minutes later, scanning the shadows like he expected an ambush. Willa was the last to arrive, and when she saw the other two, her face went through a series of expressions that told me everything I needed to know. What the hell is this? Darren demanded. I got a text from Mike, Cass said. He wanted to meet. Someone called me about money, Darren said. Said they could make my problems disappear. They both looked at Willa, who was standing very still in the doorway. Willa, Cass said, what are you doing here? Same as you, got a message. But her voice was different now, colder. The supportive friend mask was slipping. This is bullshit, Darren said. I'm leaving. No, Willa said. You're not. Something in her tone stopped him cold. We need to talk, she continued. All of us. About Mike. About the situation. About what happens next. What situation? Cass asked. The situation where your husband is destroying everything we've worked for. We? Willa smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Did you really think this was all about you, Cass? Did you think you were the only one with secrets? I adjusted my position behind the equipment, making sure the recorder was picking up everything. What are you talking about? Cass demanded. I'm talking about the fact that I've been planning this for 3 years, ever since your husband fired me from his company for financial irregularities. The pieces clicked into place. Willa had worked for me briefly, right after law school, handling contracts and billing. I'd caught her skimming money and let her go quietly, without pressing charges. A professional courtesy that had apparently been a mistake. You've been setting this up? Darren asked. The affair, the police report, all of it? The affair was real, Willa said. I just encouraged it. Made sure Cass knew how available you were, how much you needed someone to understand you. Made sure you both knew how neglected and unappreciated you were. You manipulated us, Cass said, her voice rising. I gave you what you wanted, both of you. Cass wanted excitement, validation, someone who treated her like she was special. Darren wanted someone who didn't care about his money problems. and I wanted Mike Sullivan to lose everything that mattered to him. Why? Cass demanded. Because he humiliated me, made me look like a thief in front of the whole legal community. Do you know what that did to my career? Do you know how hard it's been to build back from that? Actually, I'd kept the details quiet specifically to avoid damaging her career, but apparently no good deed goes unpunished. So, you decided to destroy his marriage, Darren said. I decided to give him a taste of what it feels like to lose everything, and it was working perfectly until he started fighting back. The repo truck, Cass said. The newspaper stories about Darren, he knows. He knows about the affair. He doesn't know about me, yet. What do you want us to do? Finish it. File for divorce, claim abuse, take him for everything he's worth, split it 3 ways, and disappear. I'd heard enough. I stood up from my hiding place, holding the recorder. Actually, I said, I think we're done here. All 3 of them spun around. Cass looked terrified. Darren looked like he wanted to run. Willa looked like she wanted to kill me. Hello, Mike, she said. I was wondering when you'd show up. Disappointed? Not really. This makes it easier, actually. Makes what easier? She pulled out her phone. The part where I call 911 and report that my friend's abusive husband lured us to an abandoned building and threatened us with violence. With what violence? The violence that's about to happen when you attack Darren. I looked at Darren, who was backing toward the door. I'm not going to attack anybody. Yes, Willa said, you are. That's when I noticed she had something in her other hand, something small and dark that looked like a taser. You're going to attack Darren, and I'm going to defend him, and in the confusion, you're going to have a tragic accident. Self-defense, of course. Willa, no, Cass said. This has gone too far. It went too far the day he fired me. Now it ends. She raised the taser, and I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the recorder at her as hard as I could. It hit her in the chest, and she stumbled backward, the taser flying out of her hand. Darren made a break for the door, but I was closer. I tackled him around the waist, and we went down hard on the concrete floor. Stop it, Cass screamed. Both of you, stop. I rolled away from Darren and scrambled for the taser, but Willa was already moving. She kicked me in the ribs, hard enough to knock the wind out of me, then grabbed the weapon. Everybody stay where you are, she said, breathing hard. That's when we heard the sirens. What? Darren started. Insurance, I said, still trying to catch my breath. Called the cops before I came in. Anonymous tip about suspicious activity at the warehouse. Willa's face went white. You son of a bitch. Yeah, I said. I learned from the best. The police arrived in force, Detective Ames and 6 uniforms. They found us in what could charitably be called a compromising position. Willa holding a taser, Darren bleeding from a scraped elbow, Cass crying, and me sitting on the floor with a recorder in my hand. It took 2 hours to sort out, but the recording was clear enough. Conspiracy, extortion, assault with a weapon. Willa was looking at serious jail time. Darren was facing disbarment and financial ruin. Cass was looking at the end of her career and her marriage. Looks like you had an interesting evening, Detective Ames said as they loaded Willa into the back of a patrol car. More interesting than my birthday party, I said. He almost smiled. Yeah, I heard about that. Happy belated birthday, by the way. The town's annual summer festival was held in the square every August, and this year I had front row seats to the best show in town. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse incident, and the gossip mill was running at full capacity. Willa was out on bail, facing multiple felony charges and disbarment proceedings. Darren had been suspended from the law firm pending investigation and was reportedly living in his car after his ex-wife cleaned out his bank accounts. Cass had moved back in with her parents and was working at a legal aid clinic for 1/3 of her previous salary. As for me, I was having the best month of my life. I'd rented a booth at the festival and set up a display of my electrical work, complete with a banner that read, Sullivan Electric, Honest Work, Fair Prices. Business was booming. Apparently, being the victim of an elaborate revenge plot made me sympathetic to the local community. Who knew? The divorce papers had been filed and signed without contest. Cass got her personal belongings and her law school debt. I got everything else, including the satisfaction of knowing that justice occasionally worked the way it was supposed to. At 3 o'clock, I climbed onto the festival stage and asked for the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I'd like to tell you a story. The crowd quieted down. Word had spread that Mike Sullivan had something to say, and in a town like Millbrook, that was better than cable television. 3 months ago, I threw myself a 40th birthday party. Nobody came. My wife had a migraine, my friends were busy, and I ended up eating cake alone in my garage. I paused for effect. Turns out, That was the best birthday present I ever got. A few people laughed. See, if people had shown up, I might never have realized what my life had become. I might have kept playing the good guy, paying other people's bills, pretending that being ignored and disrespected was normal. I might have kept believing that marriage was supposed to be a business arrangement where one partner did all the work and the other partner did all the taking. The crowd was completely silent now. But sometimes, when you're sitting alone with a birthday cake and boxing gloves, you realize that you've been letting other people write your story, and sometimes you decide to take the pen back. I pulled out a manila envelope and held it up. This contains copies of all the evidence from my wife's affair, her friend's extortion scheme, and her law partner's financial crimes. Public record now, thanks to the court proceedings. Anyone who wants to read about how 3 lawyers tried to frame a working man for domestic abuse is welcome to a copy. I scattered the papers into the crowd like confetti. But here's the thing I really want to share with you folks. Revenge isn't about hurting people. It's about refusing to be hurt. It's about standing up and saying no more when people try to make you smaller so they can feel bigger. It's about remembering that you don't have to be anyone's victim, even when they're smarter than you, or richer than you, or more educated than you. I spotted Cass in the crowd, standing next to her father. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Our eyes met for a moment, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no regret. Just the peaceful emptiness of a job well done. So here's to birthday parties nobody attends, I said, raising an imaginary glass. Here's to learning who your real friends are. Here's to discovering that the only person you really need to impress is yourself. And here's to the beautiful truth that sometimes the good guy doesn't finish last. Sometimes he finishes exactly where he belongs. I set the microphone down and walked off the stage. The crowd erupted in applause, but I was already walking away, heading back to my truck and my life and the future I was going to build on my own terms. Behind me, I could hear people scrambling for the scattered papers, eager to read the details of the scandal that had rocked their small town. Let them read. Let them gossip. Let them remember that Mike Sullivan, the quiet electrician who fixed their lights and minded his own business, had turned out to be a lot more dangerous than anyone expected. I drove home to my empty house, my paid-off mortgage, and my garage full of possibilities. Tomorrow I had 3 jobs lined up and a business that was growing faster than I could handle. Next week I was thinking about hiring another crew. Next month maybe I'd throw myself another birthday party. But this time I wouldn't need anyone else to show up. I was finally good company for myself.